Now, you can't just call yourself an expert. You got to earn that title. And at Wingstop, we've been earning it for decades. Want the secret? Start from scratch. Make to order. Sauce by hand in one of 11 mind-melting flavors. Serve hot with scratch-made ranch. Repeat for over 20 years. That's how you become an expert. Wingstop, the wing experts.
Blog Talk Radio.
On October 30th, 1990, a young woman by the name of Cynthia Lorraine Ricketts Richardson was executed and dismembered by her husband, Donald Glenn Richardson. Her body parts were scattered over a 50-mile area in and around the Columbia River in the state of Oregon. As if the abuse Cindy suffered at the hands of her husband wasn't enough, the state of Oregon delivered its own brand of injustice to not only Cindy and her family, but to a second family as well. That is, when Donald was released from prison after only a 25-year sentence for his heinous crime against his wife. When Donald was released due to a new law that had been passed by the state legislature, he committed a crime so horrible it should have earned him the death penalty. Sadly, he will be released from prison in 2023. The family has fought for years to keep him in prison even before he was released the first time. This is Cindy's story. This is finally the justice she nor her family ever received at the hands of the criminal justice system in Oregon, from the Attorney General down to the psychiatrist who stated that he was not a danger to others. While he was awaiting trial for Cindy's murder, his defense attorney stated in court that it was just a garden-variety murder. Now Cindy can rest and her family can find the peace that has eluded them for so many years. Justice for Cindy by Yvonne Mason, available today on Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
Yes, it is the beginning of another wondrous, wondrous week on Off the Chain. I am your host, Yvonne Mason. And ladies and gentlemen, you know, we just keep growing and growing and growing. And oh, yeah, by the way, that was a piece of shameless promotion for my True Crime Justice for Cindy. I highly recommend it, and I highly recommend all of you residents of the state of Oregon to write your legislatures and get the laws up there changed, because it could happen to any one of you at any given time. But our show is just, not only is it off the chain, but now it's totally off the rails. This morning I ran the numbers, and ladies and gentlemen, just on this show, just on Off the Chain on Blog Talk Radio, we are at 5,869 listeners. Now, when I started this, it was just going to be, I would be happy if I got 2,000 listeners by the end of the first year. We're not even at the end of the first year. It won't be until July the 27th, and we're almost to 6,000 listeners just on this show. When you add all the podcasts that I put this show up on, we are at 13,457 listeners. We are a little less than 2,000 away from 15,000 listeners, which was the goal for my end of the year. I'm talking about December, not July. So when we hit 15,000 listeners by the end of July, I'm going to go for 20,000. Why not? The beauty of it is the reason that we're so popular and the reason that we have so many listeners is because of all of the wonderful, wonderful guests that I have on this show. The show is a success because of them. I made myself a promise years ago when I started this show, or when I started planning to do this show, that I would make it my life's work to make my guest as successful as I possibly could. Because you see, ladies and gentlemen, I am only as successful as I help my guests to be. They are important. They are indie artists. They are indie authors. They are indie musicians. They are indie painters. They are entrepreneurs. They have platforms. And they deserve a chance. They deserve a chance to be heard. And with the Internet the way it is, this is their voice. And I am so proud of them, and I am so proud of what this show has become, that sometimes it just leaves me breathless. I can't wait to get up in the mornings and check the numbers and see where we are. And while I'm feeling breathless, I want to say thank you, Australia. I say this at every show. My listeners in Australia are the biggest fan base that we have just on Blog Talk Radio. It's not the United States, it is Australia, and behind them is the country of Canada. I don't know what's happened to my U.S. listeners, if they are on strike, if they don't know about the show, but Australia and Canada, God bless you, and I mean that sincerely, because you guys get it. You understand it. So thank you for being my listeners. I am very humbled and honored that you take time out of your day to listen to this show. So with all that shameless promotion over, let's get on with tonight's show. Tonight is a brand new guest. He's never been on before, but you can bet your bottom dollar he will be back simply because I'm that kind of girl. It's author Gabriel Burns. And his debut novel, see, ladies and gentlemen, tonight is going to be one of those nights where I can't talk or I mess up my words. His debut novel, 99 Souls, was published by TouchPoint Press in December of 2016. So it's really a brand new baby that we are talking about tonight. I'm so excited. He worked as a writer and an editor at Georgia newspapers. He is from Atlanta, my hometown, so I consider him a brother by another mother because that's the way we roll in Georgia. His short stories can be found online in online publications like Wordhaus and Burial Day. He has been a featured reader in Chicago's prestigious Tuesday Funk and the Creeping Shudder. And then he was graduated from Georgia State University, where he earned a BS in journalism, and from Southern Polytechnic State University, an MS in technical and professional communication. And he has lived in Bucharest, Prague, and Manchester. And then for a short time he went to Chicago, and now he's back in Atlanta. And right before the show he told me he's going back to Chicago. So welcome, Gabriel, my friend. I am so glad you are here.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
I told you before the show my mouth's not working well tonight. There's a disconnect between the brain and my mouth that happens sometimes. So we'll just roll with it and laugh about it. when
sure,
people say
good to me.
Well, when I get this thing from people, well, so and so was so retarded, I look at them and go, well, aren't we all? I mean, I count myself in that because none of us are perfect. We all have something wrong with us. So before the show, we were talking briefly, and you have such a storied history. Tell me a little bit about Gabriel Burns, which I know is your pen name, but the readers don't. But we'll get to that in a little bit. How did you get to here from where you were as a child? Tell us a little bit about who you are and where you came from, how you got here, and where you want to go.
Sure. Okay, so I actually wrote my first manuscript at 15, which was a very long time ago now. I have had a very winding journey to get to where I am. But what started me writing was not paranormal or horror per se. It was actually Michael Crichton's Fear. And it was the first book that I picked up that I actually literally couldn't put down. And it's just, it sort of just turned me on. I had to do it. And this might sound kind of silly, but over the next year, I started a number of different books, a number of different genres, and it really wasn't until I started writing sort of dark paranormal work that I found myself truly engaged. And I just kept going, and graduating with a degree in journalism mostly because it gave me an opportunity to write, and I did some technical writing along the way and some software development, and eventually we landed here.
Well, before the show, we were talking about the different styles of writing, and for people that don't know, those three styles of writing are as different as daylight and dark and all in between. Technical writing is different from journalism, and journalism is different from technical writing, and they're both different from sitting down and writing a novel.
Go ahead.
To the novice, explain the differences.
Well, to me, so obviously with a news story, you sit down and there's a very reverse triangular structure in the sense that you go from who, when, what, where, and you'll pretty much see that, right at the top of the story, and then there's usually a lot about how and why in the story. There are structures to these different types of writing, but at the end of the day, the objective of writing is generally the same across all platforms, and that is to express an idea, be it a story or an article or instructions, in the clearest and most concise way possible. So when you sit down when I'm writing and when I'm editing and whatever it is, whether it's a news story or journalism or whatever, fiction or whatever, then I'm looking to not get tripped up. If it's a news story, it should be clear. I should understand it without having to think twice, and the same is true in fiction. So they're different, but in all cases, the objective of written communication is effectively to transmit oral communication across a long distance, and therefore it just needs to be clear.
And I agree with that. On the flip side of that, when one is writing a novel, like your paranormal, you want to build up to the ending.
Sure.
You want to make people 3D. You want to make situations 3D. You want to make your setting 3D. Where when you're writing a newspaper article, you don't have the luxury of a 250-page novel. You got to be, like you say, concise, short, get to the point, the who, what, when, where, and how, and make it clear.
Yeah, I don't. It's really interesting that you're pointing it out this way, because honestly, I haven't given it a lot of thought. When I need or want to write something, I just sit down and write it within the parameters of whatever the objective is. So I don't have a methodology specifically for defining one from the other. I just do what needs to be done within terms of the goal.
And that makes you unique as opposed to other journalists that I have dealt with in the novel world, because you have a more open mind, because your first love was writing. You started writing at a young age, so you already understood the dynamic of what needed to go in that novel. You just had to take journalism so you could get back onto the path that you wanted. Where a lot of other journalists that I've dealt with in the writing world, they still think like a journalist and write like a journalist. And unless you're doing something that has to do with a how-to book on journalism, that book becomes very dry.
Right, and I guess that's a good way to think about it, and I appreciate you reminding me of our discussion. And to that effect, that's exactly true. I went into journalism. I never cared all that much about news. I went into journalism because I like to write, and when I was in college, it was really the only career that I could find that would allow me to make a steady paycheck doing something that I could at least sort of enjoy doing. So I mean, I always tried to be balanced. As a journalist. I didn't, input my own opinions, but it was the actual writing part of it that I most enjoyed.
And that also honed your skills so that you could do what you loved.
Sure, absolutely. And part of what I really like about novel writing, and frankly, I don't even write a lot of short stories. I've written a few, but I like projects that I can sink my teeth into, that I can spend months with, that I can really get engrossed in and get to be a part of. And one of the things that I really didn't like about journalism was that for the most part, whether it was a daily paper or a weekly paper or what have you, you were, especially dailies were the worst for this, because every day you were starting over fresh. I mean, it didn't matter what you wrote the day before, it was gone. And with novels, you commit 6 months, 8 months, a year of your life to this project, and it's it's much more meaningful to me.
And you also, do you find that when you're finally finished with that novel, that you've become so ingrained with the characters and the setting and the storyline, and you finally let it go? And I've written 17 of these boogers, and it doesn't matter at the end of every one of them, when I'm finally done with it and I turn it over to the people that are now in charge of it, it's like letting a piece of me go or letting one of my children go, and I'm going, but I got to let it go.
Yeah, I can relate to where you're coming from. While this is my first published book, it's not the first manuscript I've written. I've been writing on and off since I was 15. I've written probably 6 or 7 screenplays and about as many manuscripts to get to the point that I'm at now, with, obviously throughout the process of refining. And you do feel, I do feel a little bit like that. I can completely relate to where you're coming from. On the flip side, like right now I've got 4 other books that I want to write, and so I won't let something go until I feel like it's everything that I could do, but I'm also really looking forward to moving on and telling a new story.
That's true. Do the voices in your head tell you what to do, Gabriel?
That would make me sound like I was a little bit unbalanced, so I'm going to go with no. But
no, as authors, they do tell us what to do. Trust me, mine talk to me all the time. No, you got to let the voices talk.
I think of it more as a gut instinct, and I have a gut instinct about what's working and what's not going to work and what I should follow next. And I try very hard to listen to that, and that is, that goes along the lines of something I've cultivated over the years, because it can actually be very difficult to listen to that voice sometimes. That's
true. That is, you hit the nail right on the head, because that is not our, what's the word I'm looking for? That's not something that we as humans do naturally, because we want to fight that gut instinct. I don't know why, because usually the gut's right.
Right, and it can be difficult because, for example, I was editing a section, say, on a different book, it was probably 2 pages, and I kid you not, this is probably my 8th or 10th time going through it, and I probably spent 2 hours nitpicking 400 words, because it just, I could feel that it was wrong. And 6 years ago, 7 years ago, I probably would have let it go, because I couldn't hear that voice as well, and I couldn't listen to it as well. And so, yeah.
Now, when I'm going to switch gears just a little bit, because you and I talked about the 3 places that you had lived overseas, and you said of all the 3, Prague was your favorite.
Mm-hmm.
And I have seen pictures of that beautiful, beautiful, beautiful city, and to be perfectly honest, I am surprised that the communist regime has allowed that beautiful architecture, I can't talk now, to stand without destroying it. And you said that was the favorite place that you had lived. Why? And I know part of it was the architecture.
Yeah, part of it was the architecture, and in general, I found, whether it was Prague or Bucharest or Manchester or even in Chicago, especially though when I was overseas, there was a large community of expats in all these cities that were very interesting. They had very interesting lives and very interesting stories, and Prague, I think, part of what I loved about Prague, aside from the architecture, was the people, and the people were very down to earth, very open, especially, the expats especially, and I just felt very connected to the people I got to know there in a way that I haven't felt in a lot of other places.
That's interesting.
So,
that is very, very interesting. Let me ask you this: in living and because those are three totally polar opposite dynamics, geolocations, cultures. Was it hard to adjust to going from one culture to the next?
Well, actually, this was during the time, so this requires a little more background. So I worked as a journalist. I actually went from there into becoming a technical writer, and to be quite blunt, it's because my heart was with fiction, and journalism does not pay very much money. So unless you have a true passion to be a journalist, it's not something you stay with for a very long time. But technical writing led me into software development. So I ended up opening my own firm that I ran for about 7 years as a software developer, and that allowed me the flexibility to basically live where I wanted. I had made some friends in Romania, and so I had some connections there. And I'd always wanted to live in Europe. I'm sure that a lot of listeners do, or at least can know somebody who's wanted to at some point. And so I was able to leverage the connections I had to move over to Romania, and that was sort of my starting point. And that was a tough move. I don't know if I could have done it if I hadn't known somebody there, because it was intimidating for sure, not selling, but storing everything that I had and going to a country where I didn't speak the language and everything. I made sure to learn enough Romanian so that I could get around. And I took some private lessons when I was there. The funny thing was, in Romania, basically everybody under 30 or so spoke English. So, and nobody wanted to speak Romanian when they met me. So it was actually not difficult at all in Romania. And then I went from there to Prague, and I'd gotten so used to living in a country where I didn't speak the language that I always think this is kind of funny, but I didn't think about the fact that I didn't know any Czech until I got there. And I went shopping for the first time at the supermarket, and I'm looking for milk, and I realized I have no idea which one's milk and which one's cream and which one's buttermilk or whatever. And I'm like, okay, this is a problem. So obviously I had to learn enough to be able to at least be able to shop and get around. But the expat community in the Czech Republic is very strong, and there are a lot of good American and British companies there that employ a lot of expats. So it was I got to know a lot of really nice people while I was there. And as I said, the architecture was amazing. And it's just honestly, I really can't put into words what it's like to be in that city. It's just something I think that you have to experience for yourself.
Yeah, we talked about that for a little bit, about how the city itself is just unimaginable in its beauty and with the people and the history. I mean, you could just sit in the square there and soak up enough history for 2 lifetimes.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. There's actually a story that I heard, and I need to preface this by saying I haven't verified the validity of it, but that at one point the Rolling Stones came through on one of their tours, and it was at a point where I guess all the lights in the castle across the river were out for whatever reasons. I don't know if the government couldn't afford to light them. I don't know the specifics, but as the story goes, they actually paid to light the castle because it was such a beautiful castle. And
wow.
I mean, just it's an amazing town.
So then you, after Manchester, you came back to the States, correct?
Yes. After Manchester, we came back to the States, to Chicago.
Stayed in Chicago for a while and then decided Chicago was too brutal for the winter, so you came back home to sunny Atlanta.
That's correct.
And had you started your book in Chicago or before? Or did you start it after you got back home?
This particular book has actually been through several iterations, and believe it or not, this book actually was an idea that I'd gotten when I was still in college. So this book was technically 20 years in the making, although it's not as if I was working on it for 20 years. It's more so to say that I wrote it as a book that wasn't very good, and then I wrote it as a screenplay that was a little better, and then I didn't do anything with it for 15 years, and then I wrote it as a book that was better, and then I put it down, and then I revised it to something that was publishable. So, but this project was actually properly finished between Chicago and Atlanta. I couldn't specifically tell you when it was done for good.
Before I read the synopsis, what was the jumping off place, and what made you want to bring this story to life? Because from the synopsis, and ladies and gentlemen, yes, I'm going to read the synopsis, so y'all just sit tight a minute. We're trying to build to a crescendo here. Y'all know how this plays. So if, under Gabriel Burns, you write ghost stories, paranormal, thrillers, and what else? I
mean, for simple classification, you can call it horror or paranormal related. Paranormal related is the way I prefer to think of it. Although I heard an author recently say that horror has largely just transformed and become a part of our society in a different method, a different way than the way we thought of it before. So, but I don't like to use the word horror only because I think that conjures up images of something that may be more scary or more violent than the story is. So, go ahead.
Because this story is not that violent, and it's not that it carries a message. From what I'm getting from the synopsis, this story carries a very poignant message. I haven't read the book yet, but I'm going to, because I'm reading the synopsis to myself and I'm going, how did I miss this one?
Well, I appreciate that. I think what's important is its action, and I don't want it to come across as a message story, because it's not. I mean, it's just a good. When I sit down to write, what I want to do is I want to tell a story that entertains. I want to tell a story that you're going to be able to, that you're not going to want to put down. And, I'm not trying to change the world. I'm not trying to deliver a message. I really have nothing to say but the story. And frankly, it reminds me, there's a quote that I heard by Ernest Hemingway in an essay he wrote once, and that was sometimes in a longer message, but the part that really stuck out to me was, he said, sometimes I put the cat under the wheelbarrow just to get it out of the rain. And his point being was that effectively it was stop analyzing my work. It was like Hemingway was basically saying, I'm just trying to tell a good story. The cat's under the wheelbarrow just because it's raining. It's not under the wheelbarrow because it means anything. It's just there to stay dry. And
I like that.
I think that, we can all look at anybody's work and we can analyze it and we can find meaning. And I'm not going to say that, you can make the argument, and I think with legitimacy, that probably every author's work has meaning in it because it's driven by their lives, it's driven by their experiences. But I don't think a lot of authors sit down with the intention of driving a message home.
Oh, and I agree with that. I totally agree with that. But if we read anything, I don't care if it's the newspaper or book, even the local yellow pages. If we open our mind, we're going to learn something simply because that's the nature of the written word. Whether we intentionally, as authors, put something in there.
I think that.
Go ahead.
I think that's great. And I think. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, honey, I'm done.
I think that's great, and I think that's the way it should be. And I guess I just wanted to clarify that I'm not trying to tell a message. I'm not trying to deliver a message with a story. Should you find something in it that means something to you, I think that's awesome. But what I wanted to accomplish by writing this book, as with all books, is to literally just tell a story that you're not going to be able to put down. It's action, it's drama, there's some supernatural elements to it. There's a little bit of creepiness to it, but I didn't sit down to write this book to. Let me put it this way: you should pick up this book looking for a good thriller if you like some dark and paranormal aspects, but you shouldn't pick it up if you're looking to be able to be kept up all night, basically from not being able to sleep because you're so scared.
And with that being said, I've kept these people in suspense long enough. They're probably going to hang me an effigy or stick pins in my voodoo doll or something. I don't know. So, ladies and gentlemen, the name of this book under Gabriel Burns, Gabriel Burns. It's his first book, and I highly recommend. I haven't read it yet, but I'm telling you, from what I've read, I can't believe I've missed it. Just listen. 99 bodies have been found dead worldwide with God is blind burned into their torsos. And when Sarah Winslow's 8-year-old son, Brandon, is abducted by a man who burst through her door in an explosion of light, she is terrified that her son's kidnapping will bring the total to 100. Reflecting on the man who took him, his superhuman strength, that strange light, the way he seemed to vanish into thin air seconds after entering Brandon's room, she realizes she's up against something more terrifying than a serial killer. She's up against something supernatural. Making matters worse, the police begin to suspect that she may have killed her son and be using the abduction story to cover it up. So when they try to arrest her, she takes off on her own, desperate to find Brandon before it's too late. But if Brandon was taken by something supernatural, then why? What does it want? And how is his abduction connected to the God is Blind murders? Those are just some of the answers Sarah will seek in her quest to find her son. And then on your webpage, you have part of the first chapter. And silly me, I read it, and I'm going, you dummy, now you're hooked.
Well, I appreciate it. That is the goal, so thank you.
So now I've got to download your book because you may not know, but I write about true live serial killers. So fiction serial killer, Yvonne. Yeah, I'm in.
Well, and that's worth pointing out that this story is largely, almost entirely isolated to her quest to get her son back. So you're not finding a dead body every 20 pages or something where the serial killer is going around killing people.
What made you right in that vein with the supernatural and the paranormal. I know that it's a hot topic now. This is everybody's go-to book, but you've been writing on this book for a long time. What made you go in that vein?
Well, without getting a little woo-woo on you, probably personal experience. I mean, it's something that's always it's a genre that's always attracted me, and whether how much of that plays into life experience as a child is difficult to say. As an adult now, I look back on my childhood and I have to say, well, how much of it is real? How much of it is in the imagination? But, I had some experiences with the supernatural as a child, and it's something that helped shape, it helped shape my worldview. And something I believe in and don't express specifically through the writing of the supernatural stories I tell is that sort of stuff only finds you if you're open to it. So you can choose to experience it or not experience it. But if you want to look at the starting place, it probably all goes back to that.
And see, I understand what you're saying because I have lived with ghosts and supernatural things for many, many years. I used to think that maybe I was nuts, but no, they're there. They're real. And it does happen. So when people poo-poo it, I wait for the day that the person that poo-poos it gets a visit. Because it does happen.
Well, I believe it does happen. I think very, very little of it. I do think you have to be open to it generally. I think very rarely are you likely to experience something if you're not open to it.
And I agree with that. You have to be like I am an empath. You have to allow yourself to be open.
Right, and as I've gotten older, frankly, I've actually intentionally shut a lot of it off because it's just too much to live with on a daily basis.
It can get a bit tiring. But no, Gabriel, we're not crazy, honey. We're not insane, and they're not going to come carry us away in the little white coats and the little white box truck, because they do live among us. Trust me, they do. It's not something that we're nuts about. Trust me, it happens. Now, you also are going to be writing. Because, like you said, you wanted to keep the two genres separate because one person might like one genre but not the other, whereas someone else might like both of them. So tell the audience a little bit about the fact that you're going to be writing under two different names and why.
Sure. Okay. So I write anything, and in the future we'll write anything that has a supernatural element to it, whether it is indeed horror or a paranormal thriller or what have you, under the name Gabriel Burns. And I am also working on a number of straight-up thrillers, which I will write under the name Reagan Keeter, which is, my birth name. The reason being, the way I like to think of it is effectively Starbucks owns Tivana. But if you walk into, I don't like tea at all, personally. I'm sorry if anybody wants to shoot me right now, but I'm not a big tea drinker. So, but I do like coffee, and I wouldn't want to walk into one and find the other, or vice versa, and I'm sure most people wouldn't. And I think that extends all the way through to buying a book. I mean, for example, if you go to a bookstore and you pick up a book by whether it's Stephen King or somebody else, you're expecting a certain kind of story, and I want you to, and I have to think of the name I write under as effectively a brand, and I want you to know that when you go to pick up a book by Gabriel Burns or a book by Reagan Keeter, you have some idea of what you're getting beforehand. So if you are a person who does not like the paranormal, does not like, horror or anything like that, and you were to pick up, and I published everything under one name, then maybe you pick up a book that like 99 Souls, and you're like, oh, well, I'm never going to read anything by him again, even though you might like a different book. So it's just better to keep them separate. And actually, since we're on the topic of the pseudonym, you may find it interesting or at least amusing. I've had the pseudonym for actually about as long as I've had the idea for 99 Souls. And it comes from a combination of two things. The first name, Gabriel, I really liked it. I liked it for a lot of reasons, but it has that sort of angelic quality, being the messenger of God. And the last name, Burns, believe it or not, I was just looking for a last name, and because I wanted something that had a certain quality to it that, Yvonne, you could probably relate to, that I can't quite put into words. And and this was around the time there was a Bloodhound Gang song on the radio that would go, "We don't need no water, let the mother effer burn, mother effer burn," and I was like, Burns, Gabriel Burns. That's it. That works. So that's where the name comes from.
And it fits because, like you say, Gabriel is the angel of God. He is the gatekeeper, the protector, and the paranormal,
the messenger.
Messenger, and the paranormal that you write, just like in 99 Souls, it's not so much the serial killer, it's the woman's quest.
Right.
You're very good at this.
Well, thank you.
And the reason, you're welcome, because it stays with you. Gabriel Burns. Okay, paranormal, ghost stories, horror thrillers, that makes sense because he's the messenger. Reagan Keeter, thrillers, that fits. And you're right, it's not our books that are our brand, it's our name that's our brand. And I preach this all the time, that we are our brand. Our books don't sell because they're our books. Our books sell because of us behind them. And when we go out to sell a book, we're not selling that book, we're selling ourselves. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like anything else. If you again, I mean, there are certain authors I will buy almost any book from without even reading the jacket, just because it's the author. I mean,
yep.
and I know what they're going to give me. And okay, fine, I like some of their stories more than others, but I know what I'm getting with the author. And that's exactly what your name is.
Yes, your name, and that's why I run the show like I do, because we can talk all day about your book, not you particular, but we can talk all day about someone's book or someone's music.
Mm-hmm.
But if we don't bring the person up to the forefront, it's just another product.
Right. It's true.
So you were leaving and going back to the Windy City.
Yes.
In about 3 months. Now,
right.
When you get back to the Windy City, is your next book going to be under Gabriel Burns, or is it going to be under Reagan Keeter?
Well, I wish I could tell you that because I'm finishing one that would be published under Reagan Keeter. I've got one that I'm going to go back and reread that I might be pursuing publication with as Gabriel Burns, and it's really going to be a matter of where I can find a home for him, if I can find a home for him and where. And I've got 4 books to write after this, or 4 manuscripts to write after this. So I can't tell you for sure what's coming next. I can definitely guarantee you, though, that something is coming. Well,
the reason I ask is because like to bring my authors back. See, this was another thing I learned from Johnny Carson, from watching Johnny Carson as a young child and a young adult for all of those years. It paid off. Because what Johnny did is he knew the importance of branding the person as opposed to the name or the concept of the actor. He branded the person. So he would bring these people back time after time. So the audience would would be anticipating them and look forward to them, and then go out and watch their movies or go to their shows or whatever.
Sure.
So, long story short, I want to bring you back and launch your next book on the show.
Well, I would love to come back, and I'll definitely be in touch with you when I have more information on what that book will be and when it will be. The problem is just that I literally don't know at this moment.
Well, you should, and I say that in the most sarcastic voice.
You know, it's all about catching the right agent or the right publisher at the right time. And
that is true.
I you know, some people, I don't know what you have for listeners who are writers and who are not, who are just readers, but you know, not many years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, I self-published a book. It was something that I would not do again. So it's, you know, largely a matter of pursuing a home for the work. So
well, I've been in charge of my own destiny for many, many years now. I do have a publisher, I have an editor, I have beta readers, but I do all of my own marketing and everything else simply because nobody else could make me happy.
Yeah, and I think that's great. And I mean, yeah, unfortunately, I just don't have an answer for you. But I mean, I look forward to coming back on your show as soon as it becomes available. I mean, as soon as I have something to come on. Absolutely,
because by the time you come back on the show, I will have read 99 Souls, and I will be jumping up and down to digesting this book with you along with launching the new book, because I see you on the horizon as someone that readers are going to be waiting with bated breath for the next book. So,
well, I appreciate that. I mean, and if yeah, go ahead.
I just said get busy, make it happen.
I probably spend 4 or 5 hours a day every day with, you know, working on something. So I promise I'm going as fast as I can. It actually reminds me that. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, you go ahead, sweetheart.
It's funny that you say get busy, because it reminds me of a Tom Petty song, and I can't tell you the song specifically, but the line that always stuck with me was, "They say I'm lazy, but it takes all that time," and you can probably relate to what I'm saying.
Yes. Yes, you should see my storyboard. It's taken me 4 months to get the names, because they're all old Celtic names, and each name means something. And it started out. Well, she said that the book sat in my folder for 4 years because the name came in my head, and so I just put a folder in there with a name on it. Well, now the silly thing has decided it wants to be a trilogy, and then it's set in 1888 in Scotland and in England, and then you have all these old Celtic names, and they all mean something, and I'm going, would y'all just shut up a while? One book at a time. I can't do 3 at a time.
Well, I actually admire you for being able to take that on, and I tend to stick to present day more or less just because I don't believe I could do justice to another time period or another culture. So, you know, that's pretty impressive.
Well, thank you. I already had the research for Whitechapel, so that was an easy thing. The challenge was Scotland in that time period, especially the Highlands, because it's so isolated.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a lot of history after and a lot of history before, but you don't have any during.
Right. So
I said, okay, we'll just wing this one. So, yeah, I understand. The struggle, ladies and gentlemen, is real. It is real. Trust us, it is real. Now, in the few minutes that we have left, believe it or not, we're going to run out of time here shortly. I told you this hour would go by very fast.
Yes, you're right.
Tell everybody where you can be found. And no, ladies and gentlemen, you cannot go and buy his book now. You have to wait unless you can multitask, but you have to wait and pay attention or you're going to miss something. I told you at the beginning, join us and learn things. So now learn things. So where can you be found?
Well, you can find me, there are a couple of ways you can follow me. You can follow me on Facebook. I would suggest that if you are into the paranormal thriller, paranormal horror aspect, you look for author Gabriel Burns, so Facebook/author Gabriel Burns, and follow that page. I am doing my best to be more active on it. I'm also on Twitter, and you can find me on Twitter as well, and that's also going to be, hold on, I'll tell you for sure. Sorry, I'm actually bad at knowing my Twitter address, but I believe
that's why we call this Off the Chain.
It's actually Gabe Burns, Gabe, so short for Gabriel, Gabe Burns on Twitter because Gabriel Burns was taken. So that's hold on. It's not Gabe Burns. All right.
While you're looking that up, they can also go to... Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead. It's author Gabe Burns, at author Gabe Burns, GabeBurns. And basically, you're looking for a guy. You're going to see the book 99 Souls. If you don't see that, you're on the wrong profile.
That could be interesting. You also have a website, right?
Yes. And actually, that probably, if I'd been thinking, I would have pointed that out straight from the beginning, because that would be the easiest way to actually figure out where I am on Facebook or Twitter. So in that case, it's also let me pull it up. It's author www.authorgabrielburns.com, and there are links for Facebook and Twitter on there. And if you go to
keep going.
If you go to the website, you can actually read the first chapter of the book to check out the writing style, see if it's something you're into, and that sort of thing.
And I'm going to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I read the first chapter of the book, and then I wanted to kick myself because I hadn't read the book, because he sucked me right in. I mean, literally sucked me right in from the very first chapter. And sometimes it's very hard for authors to do that because I have a tendency to overanalyze. It's just my nature. I can't help it. I do it with television shows. It comes from my background and years of writing, and it's nothing personal. It's just something I do. But I didn't even bother to analyze. I just read, and I'm going, what? I need more. So it's your fault.
Well, I take that in the best way possible.
Please do, because I mean it from the bottom of my heart. Now, we've got 3-4 minutes before I have to go into my advertisements for tomorrow. If someone comes to you and they say, I have a dream, but what would you tell them?
To be quite honest, I don't believe in buts. I mean, the thing is that I think that's you said 3 or 4 minutes, so I'll try to keep this simple. I will say this. I can't sing at all. I will never be able to sing. I will never be a professional singer. So I think it's important that you have a dream. I also think it's important you can look at that dream through the lens, or you can take the advice of somebody and look at that dream through the lens of reality. But if you have the potential to achieve that dream, whether it's being a writer or being a musician or running your own business or being a sculptor or whatever it is, you should. you should pursue it no matter what, but you should also look at it pragmatically and understand what your limitations are. So if you want to be a singer and you can't sing like me, then at least know you're never going to be a rock star. Doesn't mean you can't go out to clubs and sing and have a good time, but, always pursue your dreams, always do what makes you happy, but at least try to do it as best as possible within the realms of what your limitations are.
And that is that's very well stated. I can't carry a tune in a bucket, but I can sure sing in my car when the windows are up, nobody's listening, and I'm not embarrassing anybody but myself because nobody cares but me. And
exactly.
And dreams change.
And I'm happy to go do karaoke and sing my heart out, but there's no way anybody's paying $20 or $30 a night to see me sing.
You might surprise yourself. You might surprise yourself. Ladies and gentlemen, we are getting in the last few minutes of the show. Now, when the show goes dark, Gabriel, I want you to stay on the line because I want to give you some instructions. So don't hang up when the show goes dark. We'll still be in archives, and they can still hear us after the show goes up, but I got some things I need to tell you. Ladies and gentlemen, remember what I always preach. If you have a dream, live it. Don't be that person at the end of your life, and somebody says, well, do you have any regrets? Because you might come back, but the dream won't be the same dream. It'll be something else, and then you'll have this empty hole where that dream was. So, and if your child has a dream, please support that child in his dream. If your spouse, your significant other, your mother, your father, your brother, your sister, your aunt, your uncle, your friend has a dream, don't tell them they can't, because no. Would that be a true statement?
I agree with all that, and I agree with all that. If I was just trying to put a pragmatic spin on it, and if it came across differently, I apologize.
No. What you segued into was perfect. It was perfect. No apologies needed. Because you're right. Dreams change, and you may start out wanting to be a singer, but then something happens and changes that dream. It doesn't mean that you failed as a singer, because you tried. It means that you needed to do something else. Not trying it is where you failed. Like you go to karaoke. You're not failure. You're successful because I don't have the guts to get up and do karaoke, I'm going to tell you. So no apology is needed for there. You did. That was a perfect segue. Because, ladies and gentlemen, our dreams do change. My brother, who is retarded, and I don't mean that in a sarcastic and nasty way. He is diagnosed as retarded. His dream was to be a store manager at a grocery store. Pragmatically, like Gabriel said, he knew that he could not do it. But his heart said, at least try. So he learned everything in the store like his boss told him he needed to do. Did he fail as at that dream? No, he succeeded. And you know why? Because he tried. He worked towards that dream, so he did not fail. So if, like Gabriel and I can't sing, it doesn't matter. We sing. So he didn't fail. Would that be a true statement, Gabriel?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. Tomorrow night, ladies and gentlemen, Romera Dimitri, another author. It's her first time on my show, and she is so excited she's dancing on the rooftops. Friday night at 8 o'clock, another author, Nick Carey, a new-time author, will be on the show. On Saturday night, my friend and fellow radio host Chris Plain will be on the show, and only God knows what will happen because I never know with this man where the show's. So join us tomorrow night at 8 o'clock because you know this is always off the chain, and we always have a blast because I don't do scripted shows. I don't believe in them. I've probably scared Gabriel off. He probably will never come back because he didn't know what was going to happen. Neither did I, but I loved having him. And, Gabriel, I am so appreciative that you spent an hour with me, my friend, and I can't wait for you to come back.
I've really enjoyed it.
And the hour flew by. I tell all of my guests. I tell all of my guests, the hour's going to fly by. I'm going to say we're at the end of our show, and they're going to go, what, Yvonne? The hour flies by. But, ladies and gentlemen, understand, you know my philosophy. If you want to achieve, stop asking permission. Just do it. And dream big or go home. because if you don't dream big, you can't catch the little dreams. So remember, tomorrow night at 8 o'clock, Ramira, I can't even pronounce her name now, Ramira Dimitri will be here. We'll have some exciting things with her. Friday night, Nick Carey. Saturday night, Chris Plain. I am your host, Yvonne Mason. This is Off the Chain with my guest, Gabriel Burns. His book. We'll get his book. And with that, I will say good night until then. Okay, now we're in archives, and the reason I wanted to keep you online is because when the show goes up in archives, I'm going to put it on my Facebook page and tag you in it, and then you spread it everywhere, my friend.
I will.
This is my gift. It's my gift to you. Put it on your Facebook page, put it on your website, put it everywhere. And then what I'm going to do in the morning is I will upload it to SoundCloud, Spreaker, Mixcloud, Podcast.com, Podomatic, and Podcast Garden. From there, and then I will put them on Facebook and I'll tag you in them. And then those podcasts plus Blog Talk Radio kicks it up to iTunes, YouTube, FM.com, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, and there's another one out there that escapes me. So you're going to be heard all over the world.
You've really got this thing together, don't you?
Yes, I do. This is why we are successful, because for y'all. This is all for y'all.
No, I know. I mean it in a good way. I'm just impressed.
Well, thank you, sweetheart, and I know you meant it in a good way, but it's because of y'all that we're so successful. That's why I can't wait to get you back, because you're going to be heard in places like the Republic of the Congo and the Russian Federation and the Ukraine and Ireland and the UK and Italy, Guyana, some little country I can't even pronounce. We're heard in over 50 countries.
I don't doubt it. That's awesome. Well, I've really enjoyed being on. This has been an honor and a pleasure, not to be cliche, but I've really enjoyed it.
Well, I have too. It's been a hoot. So stay hooked up with me so that I can get you back on. And if you want to come back on before you get another book out, that's fine too. Just let me know.
Well, absolutely. I mean, if I have something to come, I mean, whatever you think is appropriate. But I'd be happy to come back anytime. I really enjoyed it.
Okay. Well, and I know you're going to be moving in the next 3 months, so you're probably going to be out of pocket for a little bit, aren't you?
I will probably be out of pocket. Well, from a writing perspective, I'll probably be out of pocket for about 2 days. I don't ever plan on. I mean, you know, this is my passion and my commitment for the future. So I don't really ever stop. So
okay. So even if you're moving, you're still going to be writing. So what if we try to bring you back like in September? Would is that far enough in advance? Would you be moved by then? Oh, yeah. I won't have a new book. I mean, I'll finish stuff. I won't have a new published book by then, but sure. But we can talk about what you got coming out and all kinds of good stuff. And then we'll get a better beat on when you're going to have something published, and we'll find things.
Yeah,
talk about the move, talk about 99 Souls, what you got coming out. I mean, we didn't cover half of what I had written down. Oh, well, then we definitely need to do it again. Yeah. And see, and you can feed me stuff. You can say, Yvonne, I've got this I want to talk about, and this I want to see. So we got all the things. Oh, I'm so bad at that. I'm off the cuff, and I just kind of I'm kind of new. I'm kind of green at this sort of thing. So I kind of follow your lead. So I will teach you. Trust me. Once you get started, trust me. I mean, even the move itself is an hour's worth of because there's always going to something happen on a move. Nothing is ever seamless. Sure. So, all right, my love, I got you. Go ahead. I got you. I put September down, and I will add you to the book. We'll stay in touch, and I'll give you a date and see if that's good. If not, we'll work around it. It's no big deal. Sounds great. Thanks very much. I look forward to talking to you soon. Thank you, darling, and I appreciate your hour and taking your time so very much. Oh, I really enjoyed it. It was for nothing. Have a nice day. You too, honey. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And now, insurance-minded speeches from Geico.
Hardship. My grandmother would go through it every month to pay her insurance bill. First, she would handwrite a paper check, in cursive. Then, using her own tongue, she would wet a stamp for an envelope. Today, however, we need not weary our hands and tongues. Today, we can pay our Geico bill with the Geico app. Away with hardship, in with bill pay on the Geico app. Thank you.
Now, you can't just call yourself an expert. You got to earn that title. And at Wingstop, we've been earning it for decades. Want the secret? Start from scratch. Make to order. Sauce by hand in one of 11 mind-melting flavors. Serve hot with scratch-made ranch. Repeat for over 20 years. That's how you become an expert. Wingstop, the wing experts.